Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis, that made me want to do that. I decided that's what I want to do.
It's been over 60 years since Cliff Richard burst onto the British music scene with Move It and changed rock and roll forever. From chart-topping hits to sold-out arenas, he's built a career that's touched millions.
Elton was one of the first people that called me. I mean, he actually, I can't use the language he used, but he said, go for the rotten throat.
And made him a household name across generations. But now, at almost 85, a closer look at his life reveals something unexpected. And it's not what fans might hope to see. So, what is happening behind the scenes? And what does it mean for a man who gave everything to his craft?
There's no way I could have said to you, I knew I was going to be a pop star. No, I just didn't know, but I wanted to be.
Join us as we uncover the surprising truth about one of Britain's most beloved stars and how success doesn't always guarantee happiness. The pop icon's hidden pain. The newest release from Cliff Richard is called Wise Up, and it's more than just another album. It represents a deeply personal journey through some of the darker chapters of his remarkable career. In 2016, the iconic British pop star went through 4 years that he describes as the worst years of his life, as they stretched every emotional backbone and fiber of his existence. These experiences were so impactful that Richard expresses he would never wish it on his biggest enemy, further illustrating the amount of mental and emotional stress he had to endure. For over 60 years, Cliff Richard played a major role in shaping the British music landscape. Known for introducing rock and roll to the UK, his presence became a fixture across generations. John Lennon once said that British rock music had little identity before Cliff Richard. His songs received heavy rotation on the radio, his television appearances were frequent, and his live shows consistently drew large crowds. He also made a strong mark on the Christmas charts, becoming closely associated with seasonal music and traditions across the country. But the truth behind all those years of fame tells a completely different story. While fans saw the bright smile and endless performances, Cliff Richard was dealing with serious loneliness and old wounds that being famous couldn't fix. Cliff Richard is almost 85, and how he lives is just sad. Something that hits fans was when he mentioned that he leaves the lights on all night because he can't stand the emptiness. He is only now starting to share the stuff he kept hidden for decades. When he finally opened up about these things, it shocked people who figured they knew everything about him. The guy they'd been watching perform for over 60 years had been carrying around pain that all his success couldn't take away. And hearing him be so honest about it made fans see his whole story differently. Cliff Richard reached levels of success that few artists ever experience, including moments when his record sales surpassed those of the Beatles, and recognition in the form of a knighthood for his work in music and charity. Living in the public eye is complicated. Even though the media has created a well-known image of him over many years, his true story is much more complex. Recently, he chose to share private parts of his life, which shows he's becoming more open. This reveals the difficulties he faced along with his successes. His story proves that even with great fame, he still had to deal with the same personal struggles that everyone goes through. The weight of decades in the spotlight has taken a toll that few people outside the entertainment industry truly understand. But what does it mean when someone who has achieved everything still wonders if any of it was worth the price he paid? Fame can be lonely. Cliff Richard's decades-long career looks impressive from the outside, but there is way more going on beneath the surface. Even at 84, he's still dragging himself through tours and smiling for cameras, though those close to him can tell he's carrying some serious emotional baggage from years of loss and just getting older. During one recent interview, he dropped this bombshell by casually mentioning he might be deceased by next year. He didn't say it for shock value or anything dramatic. It came out tired and matter-of-fact, like he was just stating what felt obvious to him. That moment pulled back the curtain on someone who has spent his whole life keeping up appearances, showing just how worn down he feels underneath all that carefully crafted public persona. The heartbreak started way back in 1961 when Cliff was barely 21 years old. His dad, Roger, passed suddenly from blood clot complications, and it crushed him. This became the first of many losses that would haunt him for the rest of his life. What made it even worse was the timing. Here he was, this young guy whose music career was just taking off, and he had to grieve his father while dealing with all the craziness that comes with sudden fame. It is like the universe decided to mix his biggest triumph with his deepest pain right from the start. Cliff later said his dad was the one who'd believed in his music dreams and bought him that first guitar, so losing him felt like losing the person who'd made it all possible. When his dad passed, Cliff suddenly became the man of the house at just 21. Talk about terrible timing. Here he was, trying to figure out his own life and deal with this exploding music career. And now he's got his mom, Dorothy, and 3 younger sisters depending on him for everything. That kind of pressure would crush most people, but it basically turned Cliff into this super disciplined workaholic who never let his guard down in public. The thing is, taking care of everyone else meant he couldn't take care of himself emotionally. He had to be strong for his family, professional for his career, and perfect for his fans. There wasn't any room left to just be a grieving 21-year-old kid who'd lost his dad. So he built these walls around his feelings and never really learned how to let them down, even decades later when he might have needed to. The hits just kept coming, and each new loss tore open those old wounds while piling on fresh pain that Cliff's heart could barely handle. Watching his mother battle Alzheimer's for 10 long years was probably the cruelest thing he'd ever experienced. That kind of pain sticks with someone forever. Her passing in 2007 meant more than just another funeral. It was another person gone from a circle that was already way too small. At this point, Cliff had lost so many people that every new tragedy felt like some kind of cosmic joke. Like life was deliberately stripping away anyone who mattered while leaving him standing there completely powerless to change anything. The timing of this next tragedy would be particularly cruel, coming at a moment when he desperately needed support and stability. But how much heartbreak can one person endure before the weight becomes too much to bear? Love never found home. One of the most difficult moments came in 2016 when Cliff Richard's sister Donna passed unexpectedly. This occurred just weeks after he had been cleared of false allegations that had weighed on him for 2 years. During that period, Donna had been a consistent source of support, staying in close contact and helping him through the emotional toll of the legal ordeal. Her sudden death marked another major loss and underscored a recurring pattern in his life. Periods of relief often followed by new heartbreak. As time went on, these experiences contributed to a growing sense of isolation and emotional vulnerability. Bachelor Boy dropped in the early 60s. Just this fun little song about some guy who wanted to play the field before settling down. Nobody thought much of it at the time. But here's the thing. As decades passed and Cliff never walked down any aisle, that innocent song title turned into this weird prophecy that followed him everywhere. Fast forward to today, he is almost 85, and how he lives is just sad. That carefree bachelor boy from the song has become this lonely old man who admits he doesn't like being alone, but can't figure out how to change it. Journalists never stopped asking why he stayed single, like they were trying to crack some kind of code, something about focusing on his career, or just not having met the right person yet. The responses never satisfied anyone because they felt rehearsed, like he was protecting something he wasn't ready to share. When he finally wrote his autobiography years later, he opened up a bit more, though even then, you could tell he was being careful with his words. Marriage just never felt right for him. he admitted. It wasn't that he was against the idea entirely, but something about it always felt forced or unnatural when he thought about it seriously. He'd had relationships over the years, some that meant a lot to him. There were women he genuinely loved and cared about deeply. In the 80s, Cliff Richard was in a relationship with former tennis player Sue Barker, a pairing that drew heavy attention from the British media. There was widespread speculation about a possible engagement, and Richard later shared that he had seriously considered proposing. He saw Barker as an ideal partner in many ways, but ultimately chose not to move forward with marriage. He explained that while he cared deeply for her, he did not feel the level of love needed to make that kind of commitment. For him, entering a marriage without full emotional certainty wouldn't have been fair to either person. The decision reflected a careful and honest approach to relationships, even though it meant letting go of what many viewed as a promising future. Fame created an isolating bubble around Richard that made forming authentic relationships increasingly challenging, as he struggled to know who genuinely cared about him versus those attracted to his celebrity status. The constant touring schedule and media microscope made privacy nearly impossible, creating conditions where building a normal personal life became extremely difficult for someone who craved genuine connection and trust. For over 30 years, one of the few constants in his world was his close friend and former manager, Bill Lahm, who lived with him in his Sunningdale mansion, along with their respective mothers when they needed care. Their friendship became the subject of persistent gossip and speculation. But Richard always maintained they were simply like brothers, with Bill serving as the family member who saw him without the stage lights and stood by him through every professional and personal storm. When Bill Lahm passed in late 2022, Cliff Richard lost the one person who'd stuck around through absolutely everything. These two had been tight for decades, with Bill becoming the closest thing to family. Cliff had left. In one of the few times Cliff spoke about it publicly, he got emotional talking about how Bill never bailed when things got rough, unlike others who disappeared over the years. Now Cliff's sitting there, at 84 with nobody, no wife, no kids, and his best friend is gone. His inner circle has shrunk down to almost nothing. With each passing year, the contrast between his public success and loneliness becomes more pronounced, leaving him to navigate his golden years with a fundamentally different emotional landscape. How does someone who spent decades surrounded by crowds and constant activity adjust to a world where the most important voices have gone silent? When fame became prison. These days, Cliff's life has settled into this quiet routine, predictable days in peaceful houses that probably weren't what he pictured for his golden years. When people ask him about staying single, he gives these mixed answers that show he's made peace with it but still wonders sometimes. That wondering seems to follow him around now. He is a man who achieved basically everything in music, sold millions of records, got knighted, became a household name. But there's still this space where a wife and kids might have been. In the summer of 2014, Cliff Richard's public image took a major hit when police carried out a raid on his Berkshire home. News helicopters captured the scene from above, and live broadcasts quickly turned the event into a national spectacle. Richard wasn't in the country at the time. He was in Portugal, and first saw the coverage through media reports showing officers removing items from his property. The raid was prompted by an anonymous allegation of wrongdoing. Although the claims were later found to be baseless and no charges were filed, the incident had a lasting impact on his privacy and reputation. For nearly 2 years after that raid, Cliff Richard's world fell apart. He talked about feeling contaminated by the whole thing, even though nothing was ever proven against him. The stress completely wrecked his body. He couldn't sleep, dropped a scary amount of weight, and started having heart palpitations that made him think he might pass from the anxiety. He became afraid to leave his house. Today, at nearly 85, Cliff's existence has turned genuinely heartbreaking. Those 2 years of hell broke something in him that never quite healed. Even after winning his case against the BBC and getting his name cleared, he's never been the same. The damage was already done, and at his age, there's not much time left to rebuild what got destroyed. Despite the outcome, he has said that the harm to his reputation can't be fully undone. During a later appearance before members of the House of Lords, he became visibly emotional when asked whether recovery was possible. His response was clear. He didn't believe full recovery was achievable. Although his name was officially cleared, the original accusations are still accessible online, while the person who made them remains anonymous and faced no consequences. For someone who had built his life around his connection to Britain and its people, the betrayal felt especially profound and personal. How could a place that had once celebrated him as a national treasure suddenly turn against him based on unproven accusations? Success built on sacrifice. The whole scandal didn't just trash his reputation, it changed everything about how he saw Britain. After decades of calling the UK home, Cliff started retreating to Barbados more and more until it basically became where he lives full-time. But here's the thing. He doesn't talk about it like some dream retirement to paradise. Instead, he said it feels more like exile, like he got pushed out of the only country he'd ever really belonged to. It's pretty heartbreaking when someone who spent over 60 years entertaining British audiences suddenly feels like they can't even walk down a London street without people staring and whispering. Everything changed for Cliff back in 1958 when he walked into a studio and recorded Move It in under 30 minutes. That one song basically invented British rock and roll and turned him into the UK's answer to Elvis overnight. By the early 60s, he and the Shadows owned the charts. They weren't just having hits, they were defining what popular music sounded like in Britain. The success was relentless. Films, sold-out concerts, recording sessions, there was always something demanding his attention. While his mates were getting married and starting families, Cliff was stuck on this treadmill that never slowed down. Sure, the career lasted decades and made him a legend, but it came with a price tag he probably didn't fully understand at the time. The most surprising turn in his career came in 1964, when Cliff made the bold decision to become a born-again Christian at just 24 years old, choosing a spiritual path when most pop stars were embracing their rebellious images. This transformation led him to question his lyrics, refuse certain performances, and even consider leaving music entirely to become a teacher or missionary, causing many in the industry to predict the end of his career. Instead of destroying his success, this change allowed him to mature his sound and find a deeper sense of purpose, though it created yet another barrier between him and the normal life he might have wanted. His faith meant he wasn't partying with other celebrities, wasn't dating around, and wasn't behaving in ways people expected from a major star, further isolating him from both his peers and conventional experiences. But Cliff kept pushing through anyway, constantly changing his sound and style through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Hit after hit became part of what it meant to be British. His songs were playing at weddings, Christmas parties, and family gatherings across the country. He's the only artist in UK history to land top 5 albums in 8 different decades. The numbers are staggering, too. Around 250 million records sold worldwide puts him in a category that barely exists. But here's what's heartbreaking about all those achievements. They came at a price that's hard to calculate. Staying on top for that long meant giving up everything most people consider essential. The music industry chews people up and spits them out regularly. So surviving in it for decades requires a level of dedication that borders on obsession. Cliff managed to beat those odds, but in doing so, he traded away the very things that might have made all that success feel meaningful. It makes sense why someone could look back at such an incredible career and still wonder if it was all worth it. While his professional achievements remain unparalleled, the emotional cost of those choices has become more pronounced with each passing year. What happens when the very success that defined your entire identity begins to feel like a prison that keeps you from the connections that matter most? Still standing despite everything. At 84, Cliff just won't quit. While most people his age are settled into retirement, he's still dragging himself to recording studios and concert venues, even though the music industry basically pretends he doesn't exist anymore. Radio stations won't touch his new songs. He's admitted they've told him straight up that he's too old for their target audience. It's brutal how the industry works. Doesn't matter that he's a living legend or that he's still writing and performing. The toll of keeping up this pace at his age is becoming impossible to hide. People who've followed Cliff for years notice he doesn't have that constant smile anymore, the one that used to be his trademark. When he talks about upcoming shows, there's this weariness in his voice that wasn't there before. He's admitted he wakes up every morning wondering if his voice will work that day, which is terrifying for someone whose entire identity revolves around performing. There's something particularly sad about watching someone at 85 who gave everything to their craft, realizing the world has moved on without them. Each tour feels less like a celebration and more like he's trying to prove he still matters. The exhaustion isn't just physical anymore. It's the emotional drain of fighting for relevance in an industry that's already written him off. The crushing loneliness Cliff deals with now didn't happen overnight. It built up from decisions that seemed logical at the time. But here's the thing. Cliff's been honest about how a lot of this stuff wasn't even really planned. It's not like he sat down at 25 and decided that he was choosing fame over family. It was more like one year rolled into the next. One album led to another tour. And suddenly, he looked around and realized he was completely alone. Life just happened while he was busy being famous. Though Richard maintains friendships with people like Gloria Hunniford and Paul Gambaccini, who genuinely care about his well-being, these connections cannot fill the void left by the absence of a family member who might have provided the deeper emotional support that becomes increasingly important with age. The pattern of his life reveals how professional success can sometimes come at the cost of personal fulfillment, creating a situation where external achievements cannot compensate for fundamental human needs for companionship and family bonds. His current reality presents a sobering picture of someone who gave everything to his career and now faces his final years with recognition and wealth, but without the intimate relationships that might have brought meaning and comfort to this stage of life. The man who once commanded stadiums and dominated charts now navigates each day, knowing that his legacy is secure, but his world has grown painfully small. What do you think is the most heartbreaking part of Cliff Richard's story? The fact that his biggest successes coincided with his deepest personal losses, or that he's now fighting for relevance in an industry he helped create? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.